Welcome everyone to the final presentations of our very first inaugural cohort of the executive program in News, Innovation and Leadership at Newmark J-School. We are so glad that you can be here with us today to learn about their work on their capstone projects and how they tackle transformation and change in the media industry. Exactly 1 year ago, I packed my suitcase in my office close to Times Square. I threw in my laptop and some notes and left the office thinking I'd be back after a few days, but we all know it didn't happen that way. So today is my 1 year, if you want to say so, pandemic anniversary. And I can tell you that launching and kicking off an executive program pretty much a few weeks before a global pandemic starts has been an interesting experience. We obviously had to pivot from a hybrid program to a fully online program, but our participants also had to tackle a lot of transformations and changes. They've shown amazing resilience and grace under pressure in this last year. And one thing that happened, I think also a little bit because of the pandemic, is that there is now this incredible bond in the group and in the cohort and between instructors, coaches, and participants. When we envisioned that program, our theory of change was pretty simple. We felt that if we really, truly want to transform media, we need to change who leads and runs media. We need to bring a new, more diverse, more product and audience and business-centric and savvy group of leaders into the future management roles in media organizations. So what we did is we took parts of an MBA, classes on strategy, on finance, on operations, and on organizational behavior, and we added quite a few really media-centric, best practice-oriented classes on product thinking, product development, revenue strategy, audience centricity, and innovation work. And then we created a leadership path where we helped our participants to reflecting on their own leadership and management style, and hopefully throughout the program becoming even better and more self-aware leaders and managers. One of our beliefs is that a lot of the value currently created in media organizations is created at these intersections of product, business, editorial, and technology. And we felt that some of the programs that are out there in executive education are not really geared towards these highly matrixed, highly interdisciplinary organizations that are radically transforming. Today, we're excited that you, as the audience, are going to be able to see what our participants in the executive programs have been working on over this past year. They tackle big, audacious, hairy challenges, and we encourage them to think big. They are talking about rethinking organizations' cultures, rebuilding product portfolios, driving diversity, equity, and inclusion in their industry. And we're going to hear from all of them today as they share learnings from the program, their approaches to leadership and management, and also how they tackle these strategic challenges in their organizations. I want to thank all the instructors, coaches, and guest speakers who have made this program possible. Without them, it would never have been possible, and they've been so generous with their wisdom and advice throughout this whole year, and we are deeply grateful for that. I also want to thank the management of the school, Dean Sarah Bartlett and Andrew Mendelson, who believed in this program and who made it possible that we built it and we executed it in such short time. And I want to thank my partner in crime, Jeff Jarvis, without whom none of that would have been possible, and who originally incubated the idea of a program for media leaders that's different from the programs that are already out there, and who was so present and generous with his knowledge and experience in all of our classes. Last but not least, the most important person, I want to thank Melissa Depento, our program coordinator, who not only navigated that shift to online masterfully throughout the year, but who also organized this event today and all the other events that we've been doing. So thank you so much, Melissa, for that. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Jeff Jarvis.
Saw that our own students in the school, at a highly diverse school, were being sent out into a world where their careers were not being developed and they were not being understood, because newsrooms are still run too much by people who look like me, old white men. And so one of the goals of this program was indeed to increase the diversity of management and thereby increase the equity in newsrooms. And so I think it's important to see that the people we have here are brilliant and going to change not just journalism, but change how newsrooms are run. They are strategic, they are innovative, they're about change and about equity. Those are the things that Anita and the faculty taught them. So I agree. This is, I think today is Thursday, is my pandemic anniversary, my panversary. The last time we saw people in another program that Anita was running, but it was amazing to see this group in only 1 week bond with an esprit de corps that lasts to this day. And Anita and Melissa changed the program overnight with the pandemic and had to adapt it. And then we ended up meeting I saw them every Thursday. Anita saw, and Melissa saw them much more than that. But Thursday became a high point of every week because of the people who are here, because of their intelligence, their motivation, their innovation, their generosity, their dedication. These are the leaders of journalism. These are the people who give me hope for our field. So you'll hear from them in a moment, but first I want to introduce our dean and thank her for her support for this program. Without her, this wouldn't have been possible. Sarah Bartlett.
Thanks, Jeff and Anita, and good morning and afternoon and evening to all of you. It is really a pleasure to see you, and I cannot begin to describe my excitement in hearing all of your capstones today. I'm really looking forward to it. As Jeff and Anita have said so well, this has been a long-term goal of the school, and you are our inaugural class, so what could be more important? I will tell you that throughout this year, I have heard nothing but praise from both Anita and Jeff, who just are blown away by the talent and the patience that you've displayed with the conditions under which we've all had to work, and your commitment to changing the world with us. So I don't want to get in the way of these presentations any longer. I'm going to pass it to Melissa, and I'll see you again tomorrow. But just again, congratulations. It's been a long haul, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've learned. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Melissa Depento. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what today will look like. We have 16 fantastic participants in this group, some of whom have prepared videos that we'll be sharing and playing here, and others who will be participating in mini live conversations here with Anita, where there'll be a little bit of Q&A and dialogue. So these students have focused on a wide variety of topics that center on things like products, sustainability, changing newsroom culture, engaging with young audiences, and much more. So we kind of have folks grouped together in similar categories. So we hope that adds a little something in terms of thinking about how these students have approached this work. So without further ado, we will kick off the first little segment here, featuring 2 videos under the title of Journalism and Newsroom Sustainability. If you have questions for these folks, feel free to drop them in the chat, and they should be able to respond or connect with you to answer those questions. So the first topic is journalism and newsroom sustainability, and we will see videos from Thierry Bacchus and Ana Arriagada. Just a moment while I get this pulled up.
Hello everyone, my name is Thierry Bacchus, and while I record this, I am a managing editor at Süddeutsche Zeitung based in Munich, Germany. But when you see this, I will have moved on to join WDR, a public broadcaster in Cologne. For my capstone project at CUNY, I was inspired by a class with Jared Dicker from the Washington Post, in which we discussed the creator economy and its opportunities for journalists. I began reading stuff, learned about Casey Newton, Matthew Iglesias, and Helen Peterson or Glenn Greenwald leaving their well-paid job at these very renowned digital publishers to start a career as a paid Substack newsletter writer. And I was like, oh wow, this is going to be huge. I thought, what if this trend, as so many others, hits Germany sooner or later? I was basically expecting this when I started. I had the time to do some research at the end of 2020. I talked to more than 30 journalists focusing on journalists I believe have a chance to succeed as creators because they are A, highly specialized and skilled in reporting on niche topics, and or because B, they have quite a presence in social media. I also talked to media journalists, software providers, J-School professors, and to J-School students. And what I found is this. The tools, Substack Review and a journal provider called Steady, for example, they are great. But the very vast majority of journalists in Germany aim to pursue careers in legacy media companies and feel very, very comfortable as employees. None of the colleagues I interviewed for this project is ready to or willing to start as a creator. They value the good money and the security, and they do not want the daily struggle with self-employment. Journalists simply do not like to be entrepreneurs in Germany, or to quote Jeff Jarvis, in risk-averse Germany. They are not so much into the business of journalism, and most of them do not want to be. They haven't learned how to write a business plan or how to develop products. They do not like to promote their stuff on social media and feel really, really uncomfortable to ask people for money. So I believe these are not the best options to start as a creator, right? But I found two other things. One is that some journalists, at least, think about starting something in part-time because they do want to have a second source of income. Two is that tools like Substack offer a very cheap opportunity to experiment for young journalists. I talk about that in a popular podcast show called Was mit Medien, to which I was invited to after publishing my research. Wenn ich jetzt ein Nachwuchsjournalist bin und ich komme in die Situation, ein Newsletter zu gründen und letzten Endes belegen zu können, hey, guck mal, ich habe hier mein eigenes Produkt entwickelt und die Menschen nutzen das gerne. Ich habe x 100 Abonnentinnen, einige davon bezahlen mich auch dafür, dann ist das natürlich ein sehr gutes Argument, danach zu einem Verlag zu gehen und zu sagen, guck mal, ich verstehe schon, was nutzungszentriertes Arbeiten ist und stell doch lieber bei mich ein. Vielleicht stellt dann der Nachwuchs sogar fest, ja, also so eine Verlagskarriere ist gar nicht so attraktiv, ich kann ein eigenes Unternehmen gründen. Afterwards, people came to me and asked, how do you do that? How do you develop your own newsletter? And how do you earn money with it? I decided I would write a guide for creators willing to start their own newsletter in a fictional city of 300,000 people in Germany. It has become a pretty long read, but I will keep it short here. I basically walk people through 10 steps from identifying a target audience to developing a first prototype, thinking about how to earn money, developing a growth strategy, and turning your audience into a community. And of course, I use some of the beautiful product development tools we got to know in class this year, like the value proposition canvas or the business model canvas. What I think is interesting here is that the concept I developed for my fictional scenario comes pretty close to what Axios Local has started in Denver on February 22nd. So I was thinking, well, maybe I should just use my own guide and start my own thing, because why not? And that's it, folks. Thank you for your attention, and bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Ana Arriaga, the co-founder of El Soberano, a media outlet based in Chile. We cover social organizations, especially the ones focused on social rights, environment, and women. Roberto Bruna, writer and journalist, came with the idea of El Soberano in 2015, when he thought about a media that covers the voices of civil society that was silent by the traditional media. He thought about El Soberano not just as a news platform, but also as a meeting point where civil society organizations could come together and work together, because sometimes and many times they have the same goals, but they work independently. We launched on January the 1st of 2016. But of course, with little resources, we focused on what journalists do best: make content. Then October the 18th came, and in Chile started a social outbreak. Massive riots, demonstrations start in Santiago, where we are based, and in a matter of hours, they go all over the country. Chile is known because it's one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, but it's also one of the more unequal countries in the world. Remember, Chile is well known for being a lab for neoliberalism. Even the water is private here. Also, the executive program in CUNY came into my life, remembering what was our main focus when we started, and also giving me tools to make El Soberano a more sustainable media. Our original vision was more needed than ever, not only because of citizens in Chile who are trying to get control again of their destiny, but also because this approach could really help us to grow and to build a sustainable media outlet. So in the project I'm going to talk about in the next minute, my goal is to think in journalism as a service. Also, to build a product that tackles a big, heavy issue: the connection between citizens and organizations they can trust. The problems we detected are that there is no place with centralized information about social organizations operating in Chile or in Latin America, that the only way to search for them is using Google, for example, or social media, or mouth-to-mouth recommendations. What issues are they addressing? Can we trust on them? Who is behind? It's not easy to get these answers, and journalism is key for that. When we define the customer, we go to our expertise, civil society organizations. We check with them, and it's not an easy task to find each other. They have to invest time, and there is no quality information about them out there. Using jobs to be done as framework that focus on tasks instead of, for example, lifestyle or age or gender, we found a very interesting thing. For social organizations, looking for each other is very much like as dating. Are they reliable? What are they doing in social network? Is their vision and mission connected to mine? So we came up with 5 expected outcomes that social organizations have. So we came up with a matchmaking tool that brings organizations the key information they're looking for. What is that? Who are the leaders of the organization? Who is funding this organization? What other links they have, allies and associated? What are they talking about in social networks? What are the news coverage saying about them? In El Soberano, you're going to find the search homepage to look for keywords or look for organizations by topic or by territory. And in this example, you can see how the information of social organizations is shown with special emphasis in those things our users find more valuable: speakers or directors, news, social buzz, alliances, financing. All basic information will be open for everyone, but more tactic information is going to be for registered users only, so we can start building our membership program. We also want to explore tech as a possible source for income, because this tool can be useful, for example, for other media that want to bring together their communities in a very, very tangible way.
If you have questions for Thierry or Anna, please drop them in the chat. They'd be happy to talk more about their work with you. And now I'll pass it over to Anita for the first of the mini conversations.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was already so inspiring. And I also want to use the time to say thank you to one of our school's alums, Vicky Munch, who is also in the chat here. Hey, Vicky, and who has helped us produce these amazing videos. So thank you for doing that, Vicky. So as Melissa said, some of the things that we're going to do today are going to be conversations with some of the participants in the executive program about some of the topics they are passionate about and some of the topics they tackle or tackled in capstone projects. So I would like to introduce the first little panel that we have, and we're going to talk about creating and targeting content for young and diverse audiences, a topic that several in our class chose to focus on in their capstone projects. So the first group is going to be Maye Primera, who is a digital storytelling and multi-platform strategy editor, formerly at Univision. Etar El-Katadneh, who is a digital newsroom manager and strategist, formerly at the Wall Street Journal, and Almudena Toral, who is the executive producer video for ProPublica. So I'd like to invite all of you three to unmute yourself when we have this conversation. And I'd kick us off with a question. Can you tell us each a little bit about your capstone project and why you chose that topic, why you think it's a crucial topic for the industry? Almo, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all my colleagues. So as part of my capstone, I've been focusing, and I have studied and continue studying the streaming wars and the business and content strategies of streaming platforms like Netflix, HBO, Hulu, etc. And particularly looking at the opportunities for news outlets in that space. As you all know, consumers are projected to spend a lot of money on streaming video in 2021, and the pandemic was a huge bump for a lot of the streaming services. I think the forecast for 2021 is 41 billion. And Netflix has over 200 million subscribers, Disney Plus over 100 million, Amazon Prime Video 150 million. And I'm particularly interested in looking at what can we learn from the entertainment world and from Hollywood specifically about how to reach diverse audiences and young audiences, especially through different storytelling. How can we think about bringing real stories that can be rigorous investigative journalism to the long form space and meet audiences where they are in their couch in the evening? And how can we make some of that journalism more accessible, more fun, more beautiful and interesting? So it's work in progress, and that's a bit of what I've been looking into.
I love that, Alma. Ifar, can I pass it on to you?
Hi, good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. I will say it feels very different to be talking to the 16 of us versus all 70 people in an audience. So it feels like I'm just talking to you guys, so that's great. I'm in San Francisco. It is 6 o'clock in the morning, so it also feels weird to be presenting this early. But thank you all for being here. I have been working with content for young people for almost the last decade. So at the Wall Street Journal, I was helping co-launch a digital magazine for young audiences that kind of tackled text, video, all kinds of multimedia formats. And before that, I spent 5 years at AJ Plus, leading the newsroom as senior executive producer. So over the last kind of decade, I've become very, I've worked a lot with young people and thinking, how do we produce content, storytelling, formats, off-platform distribution, how we produce this content for them. And I kept giving lots of trainings, and I feel over the last years, there's been a set kind of shared guidances, shared practices that were very applicable to a lot of organizations. And whenever I would give trainings, they would be like, this is great. You know, we want to kind of implement these. How do we implement them? How do we figure out if this can work for us? Should we be on Instagram? Should we be producing video? Should it be vertical? Should we be, which kind of young people are we targeting? So I kind of decided to come up with a guide that was based not just on my own experiences, but pulled together the experiences of people across the industry, some who are working in purely digital, like Now This, some very traditional legacy organizations like the Financial Times. I actually think, did I see someone say hi to Robin, who was one of my case studies, who worked on special formats at the FT for 13 years. I distilled it into about 6 sections. So sections that talk about how to target your specific audience, how to decide what content to create, defining your unique selling proposition, finding your niche, how do you do storytelling properly? And for this guide, I defined young audiences as Gen Z. So clearly completely out of our target market already, but born between 96. So I think the eldest is turning maybe 25 this year. So storytelling, and then productions, that includes everything from resource to mobile to video to formats, off-platform production, distribution, and community. And then I brought it all together with a case study of a small organization that I actually feel was doing a great job at it, which is chemical and engineering news.
I love that. Thank you so much. Maya.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anita, for all this year. And well, in the last year at CUNY, I designed a new brand called At Belonging. I wanted to do something useful for young Latinas in the US struggling with mental health. So through this brand, I plan to give them tools to navigate that mental health stress and to excel in life in the US. And there is a really hairy problem behind that, which is that young Latinas are facing this silent mental health crisis for a very long time. Since the 90s, suicide attempt rates among Latinas are higher than among any other youth group in the US. So feelings of pain, rage, isolation are shaping their youth in so many ways, and in extreme cases, they are hurting themselves. I found that experts like studying this found that they are facing an acculturation gap. So they don't see themselves reflected in the mainstream media or in the mainstream culture, nor in their parents' culture and in the Spanish-speaking media. They are also living sometimes in environments of failed communication with their parents, of domestic violence sometimes. And during the pandemic, in the confinement, they have like less resources to become independent. They are like going to social media to seek their comfort and information. Some Latinx therapists actually are turning into influencers to reach them on TikTok, on YouTube, or in Instagram. And there is also like a growing scene of Latina entrepreneurs and independent digital media that are in some way like talking about this topic, but from other perspectives. They talk about culture or identity from the humor, or speaking about empowerment, but there is no one brand or one influencer like solely dedicated to tackle this problem of mental health. So I thought it might be a good idea to have a brand to do that. My goals are to raise awareness about the problem and also to reduce the stigma around mental health, which is a taboo topic for a lot of Hispanic families. And also the access to mental health services is really limited in the United States for Hispanics. So I plan to engage them, as Almudena said, in the platforms where they are spending more time, which are social media and streaming. And I want to foster their conversations on these emotional challenges and act as a bridge, connecting this population with this problem with experts and organizations that may have a solution for them. So in the end, what I want is create value for them by producing and programming content in English, Spanish, Spanglish, to relieve their daily pains and to give them tools not only to cope, but to excel in life. So at the end, creating happiness for them and give them some confidence.
I love that so much, Maya. And one of the things, and I have to say that I learned from all the three of you, Almo, Maya, and Ithar, is, and that is one of the beautiful things about that program. I feel I learned so much. I feel like the learning journey was kind of a journey where all of us gave something and also learned something. And I learned so much about how underserved young audiences and specifically diverse young audiences are by existing media. So that I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware to the extent that existing media is not reaching these younger and more diverse audiences. So I know it's hard in a few minutes to tackle that whole issue, but if there is one thing that you feel media, whether it's large legacy broadcasters or smaller media organizations, if there is one thing that they need to start doing right now to become more focused on young, diverse audiences, what is that one thing, Ithar?
Just putting me on the spotlight, literally right there. I would definitely say it would be to listen and involve them. Over and over again, this came up. I talked to a lot of young people too, obviously for this project, a Gen Z consulting company. And a lot of organizations think it's about the flashy video, or we need great transitions, or, it just needs to be very TikTok. We need to be on all these platforms. But I feel everything comes back to the stories that you tell. It comes back to representing their voices. It comes back to being authentic. This is a generation where trust and authenticity and sharing their experiences, it's on track to be the most diverse generation in the history of this country. And they don't see themselves represented. They don't see themselves, they're not hired. They're not, being listened to. They're being condescended to. The organizations I talked to that were doing a great job, there was usually like one person who was the resident millennial, the resident Gen Z, who's then being tasked with do this project, right? And if you watch, we've gone beyond, in 2013, it was all about doing beautiful video, right? And the market wasn't saturated. There wasn't all this incredible competition for their eyeballs. This is a generation that's on 5 screens at the same time. They jump from, literally they wake up in the morning, and then within 3 minutes, they've learned a new skill. They've gotten the news, they've listened to music, they've caught up on emails, they've answered their friends. And to be really integrated with that, it's not enough to just be where they are and to kind of do what they do. You have to actually bring them into your projects. You have to produce with them, right? Listen to them, hire them, respect them. Don't believe the stereotypes. Yes, they are interested in news. Yes, they don't need the most fancy things. So listening to them and producing with them would be my biggest advice.
Awesome. Almo.
I agree completely with everything that Ithar has said. I think the collaboration aspect is huge. And I think there's a lot of taboos and myths that are going down over time about collaborating with our audiences in general, and what does it mean to be a reporter and empowering sources and collaborating with them. So I find everything that Ithar said very inspiring. I was also going to mention, and I know Maya knows much more about this than I do, the representation aspect. I think news outlets and also even streaming platforms which have focused on have a big problem with representation on screen. Obviously, video is huge in the conversation about young audiences, but we still have a long road to go in terms of representation. And as somebody who has worked, is of Latino background, has worked with Latino communities and immigrant issues in the past, also the language issue, which is not everything is black and white, like Ether said, and a lot of people stereotype communities in different buckets, and there's huge markets, for example, for Latino eyeballs, and what does that mean, and how do you do that? And it starts with representation on screen, and starts with actually not dictating from the top, but goes back to the collaboration and creating with the community. And I'll leave it there.
Such a good point. Thanks for sharing that, Almo. Maya.
Yes, I think also representation is really important, and not only representation of demographics, I mean, faces, colors, skins, but representations of the problems that they have, of their conversations. And it's not charity, it's the smart thing to do, because we can build like a very strong business case for representation here. I mean, the future, and especially speaking about Hispanics, which is like the fastest growing minority in the US. And they're not on the screen, not in TV, not in cable, not in streaming. It's like almost 20% of the population and 5% of representation overall in the screen. And there's a little bit more on streaming, and that's why they're like going there. So if you want the young to listen to you, to see your shows, so you have to do something about that representation and have them in the table, as Ether mentioned.
Thank you. That was so, all of your projects are so fantastic and tackling such an important issue. We'll please keep the questions coming in the chat, and we'll have the opportunity to discuss that and continue going. I'd love to pass it on to Melissa to introduce some of our next speakers. Thank you all.
And thanks to the three of you. That was such an important conversation, and I know we all learned and gained a lot from that. So the next segment that we're moving into is thinking about product. We've got a few videos here where folks are really diving into AI, newsletters, what audience-centric products look like, and even more. So let me introduce the 4 participants' videos in this little segment, and please feel free, if you have any questions for these participants, please drop them in the chat and they'll be happy to answer them. So we'll hear in this segment from Daisuke Futura, Lauren Berry, Jonah Comstock, and Alex Trussler.
Hi, I'm Daisuke from Japan. My capstone project is to launch startup media to fight misinformation. First, I want to talk about myself and what brought me to this project. I started my career at the Asahi Shimbun, the national newspaper in Japan. And after that, I joined BuzzFeed as a founding editor-in-chief of its Japan edition. Having worked for both, I wanted to support digital transition of Japanese traditional media. So I left BuzzFeed and started my own business, and then joined CUNY to learn business of journalism. Let me share Japan news industry landscape. It is still so big in Japan. We have about 100 national and local newspapers. The total daily circulation is decreasing, but still about 35 million last year. The revenue from print is so big that newspapers have been trapped in innovators' dilemma. They couldn't have transformed into digital media. On the other hand, Yahoo Japan has been growing so big, The monthly PV is now 25 billion. Almost all newspapers offer their articles to Yahoo for a price of 0.00024 USD per PV. People read free articles on Yahoo, and so they don't want to subscribe to each newspaper and internet media. The number of digital subscription is so small that newspapers still hesitate to invest in digital. When I explained this at the first session of our program at CUNY, my question was, how can I support their digital transformation? The answer from my amazing cohort was, you should start by yourself, because Japan is a blue ocean. That brought me to this capstone project. The next question is, what are the problems to be solved? I picked up 3. Some are common worldwide, while others are particularly worsening in Japan. Information overflow, fact-check shortage, lack of trust. And then solutions, fact-check, explanation for what to know, and media literacy training. I want to dig deeper using jobs to be done analysis. First, fake news is a problem. 81% of Japanese people think so. What needs are unmet? To sort truth out of false, to know what to know, to develop the ability to distinguish reliable and accurate information. And who want them? Yes, the 81%. And the people who want to learn how to sort truth out of false by themselves. There is no organization providing media literacy or verification training in Japan. In short, our mission is one-stop solution to know what to know and trust. Gen Y and Z is main target, but I also want to reach out Gen X because they are the core of the Japanese population and internet users. Business model consists of reader revenue and others. The revenue target for 2022 is 200,000 USD. And timeline is this. I will start it after my contract with Google this year, and will launch the site next year. Competitive advantages. Fact Checker, who is a board member of Fact Check Initiative, which is the only one fact check organization in Japan. And editor-in-chief, who built fastest growing internet media. And trainer, who worked for Google News Lab as teaching fellow. It's me. That's all. I really appreciate to my amazing cohort. They have been inspiring me for this project. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lauren Berry, and I'm the Global Managing Editor for Data-Driven News and Automation at Bloomberg. I'm also a member of the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism's Executive Program in News Innovation and Leadership's class of 2021. I'm here today to discuss creation strategies in newsrooms and how an AI-driven approach can help organizations tackle this vital process. First, what do we mean when we say curation? To put it most simply, creation is how we present content to readers. If newsrooms are going to put their best efforts into high quality and impactful content, we want to make sure the right people see it. This is especially important at an organization like Bloomberg, where we publish more than 5,000 stories a day. There are a few main points to consider when analyzing the impact of a newsroom's curation strategy. First, how do readers find the content that they want? How do we anticipate what a reader wants to see? And how do we format and package content to fit a reader's needs? Successfully curated content should save readers from searching through irrelevant content, target a specific reader need, and be easily accessible and usable by the reader. What do organizations do well with regards to curation? First, many organizations have already found that it's beneficial to aim to be diverse and targeted in their creation approach. They have specific platforms, they understand audiences, and they look to give their readers the right format and content types that they want. This is done by utilizing editorial expertise, which builds off the skills and experience and knowledge of their journalists. It also allows for more nuanced judgment decisions across content and platform types. Where can newsrooms improve their creation efforts? Organizations should look to limit repetitive and manual workflows. For the most part, newsrooms are still utilizing fully manual approaches to their creation strategies. This can lead to inconsistencies in how news is displayed and causes delays as we wait for editors to see, identify, judge, and action content. Not only is the vast majority of placement decisions on the most important platforms done manually, newsrooms are utilizing multiple different teams of editors to make these decisions. One of the major reasons newsrooms employ so many different teams is because the vast majority of newsrooms have disjointed and disconnected tools workflows. This could mean one tool for placement on the homepage, another tool for print publications, a different approach for newsletters and mobile, the list goes on. In addition to the inefficiencies of this approach, it limits the ability for newsrooms to make collaborative decisions around coverage and have the proper tracking and metrics to measure success. So given all of this, what do we want to do about it? Newsrooms should invest in identifying and building consensus around ideal curation behaviors and workflows. I would look to recommend that the best practices for newsroom curation content be pre-publication. Wherever possible, decisions about where a story is going to play should be made before it's published. In order to do this successfully, reporters and editors need to be just as invested in ensuring that their stories are accessible and visible to readers as they are in composing the story in the first place. Integrated. A multi-platform approach for content placement should be considered versus specific teams that only handle content for specific audiences. Data and metrics should also be analyzed and tracked, as well as easy to identify, use, and share. This also calls for highly integrated tools workflows. Creation decisions should be part of the content management system, not a secondary step. AI informed. Look to limit unnecessary manual workflows and use AI assistance for high-value content where we deem human intervention is necessary. Building an AI-driven solution for newsroom workflows can oftentimes seem overwhelming and unrealistic at the start. Organizations can get ahead of themselves when looking to implement automation and innovation-driven processes and can be derailed by the challenges that arise along the way. Here are some tips I think are vital for newsrooms to build a successful AI and automation strategy. First, start where you are. One of the biggest mistakes you can make when introducing automation or AI workflows to your newsrooms is to launch this effort as part of a new content type or platform. Instead, look to time-consuming workflows in your newsroom that you can improve. This could be anything from how your reporters take notes to a daily feature that readers love but doesn't require a high amount of journalistic expertise. The best part of this approach is that your newsroom will immediately feel the benefits and be more willing to be part of the process as they are helped by improved workflows and less time spent on structured tasks. Utilize your editorial judgment. Journalists need to bring their skill and knowledge to the process and work with product managers and engineers to ensure editorial integrity isn't lost in moving to an automated approach. Choose the right content type. The best content for automation will meet these 3 criteria: structured data that is high quality and accessible, a story logic that can be defined in a template, and a replicable trigger to release the story. Take the time to analyze your content before you start. What are the bare minimum requirements for a specific content type? What should you stop doing that you're currently investing time in? And what is most important for an AI approach to maintain? Finally, be open to the idea that it's a process. Successful AI and automation integration takes time and is an evolving process. Oftentimes, early versions of a story or a product are not going to be perfect. That's okay. Consider how your newsroom can still utilize these efforts as they evolve. Thank you for your time today, and to my colleagues and professors on the executive education team. I hope these tips and guidelines can help organizations as they look to build more integrated and innovative newsrooms in the future.
My capstone project is all about newsletters. I lead content development for a media group that's attached to a healthcare technology nonprofit. We've always had newsletters as a big part of our strategy, but these are our newsletters. They're good content, they're fine aesthetically, but they haven't really changed in the last 5 years. And that's a problem because today's landscape includes a lot more competition and a lot of new ideas in newsletters that we're just not taking advantage of. Ideas like personal connection. We have newsletters that incorporate memes. We have newsletters that are much more specialized, that have these strong visual identities. So my project was to look at what's out there and figure out how we can improve our newsletter offerings to bring it more into the 21st century and more strongly compete with the wide world of newsletters that's emerging. Breakthrough that I had came during one of our unconferences, actually, and it came out of a conversation with Mary. What I realized is the divide between our kind of brand of legacy newsletter and these new, more personal newsletters that we're competing with is really around the question of what is a newsletter for. We've been focusing on click-through rates and thinking of newsletters as a conduit that takes the reader from their email inbox to our website, which is ultimately where we want them to be. But these newsletters that we're facing off against often aren't like that. They are the whole destination. The job that the newsletter is doing is not taking you somewhere else. It's just giving you the day's news update that you're after. So the question was, can we switch our strategy over, or should we, towards that destination idea? Now, originally I thought it was cut and dried. We would just abandon our old strategy, move into this new world. But as we started to look at it, there were a lot of reasons why it didn't make sense to do that. Some of the roundup link and headline newsletters are doing quite well. And there's a large percentage of our audience that still appreciates that style of newsletter. Plus, we still sell newsletter ads to some of these KPIs that make it make sense to focus on click-through and conversion. So instead, we decided to look at a hybrid strategy where we would keep the old newsletters doing what they're doing, but still look for ways to improve them, but really create a new class of destination newsletters and make sure that we didn't hold them to the standards of the old click-through newsletters, but really developed a unique strategy and KPIs around those. This program really prepared me for this project in a lot of ways. It taught me a lot of ideas and strategies about change management and making change, and about product development. The classes on product development were hugely helpful, about market research and being reader first, and using that jobs to be done framework to think about who your readers are and what they need. And then really to solicit their input too. So we've done a couple of surveys as a part of this project, a brand survey and another newsletter survey that I launched myself. The other thing that's coming hugely in handy is just the idea of stakeholder management and negotiation. There are so many people in my organization who have to be involved in anything that touches newsletters, from advertising to marketing to graphics to corporate, because of the branding. And it's, and that's not even to speak of my own supervisors and direct reports that really need to buy in to make this work. So there's been a lot of effort, and the class has really helped me to prepare for those conversations. But more broadly, a lot of what we've discussed in class has been about the state of online journalism, where it needs to be, what it needs to do, where it's going. And I've really kept those ideas top of mind as I've thought about what our newsletter strategy looks like, what our overall strategy for profitability looks like. As a immediate group of a membership organization, we have kind of a unique role to play. We're not just about our bottom line, we're also about being instrumental to the nonprofit, in this case as sort of like a top of funnel acquisition vehicle for new members. And that really gives us a very specific mission with our newsletters, and gives us sort of permission to be a little more personable and approachable, and create those really sticky newsletter experiences in the hopes that then those people will stick around and become members of families. So all of that has gone into how I've thought about this project, and I think a lot of these lessons will stick with me in future endeavors at Hints Media as well.
Hello everyone from Germany. My name is Alexander Trussler. I work at Nordkurier, which is the regional newspaper in the northeast of Germany in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. And 15 months ago, when I have started the News Innovation and Leadership program, I had a different job. I was a product manager at another regional newspaper company and worked together with a startup on a, let's call it local community platform, similar to Nextdoor, just with the difference that it was owned by the newspaper. And then Corona hit us. So I changed jobs then, and since August, I work at Nordkurier as a digital transformation manager. And as I work with legacy media organizations, I always wonder, are subscriptions to a news website or an app actually enough for digital revenue? A website or an app with a pretty broad focus that has derived from the newspaper? Because when I look at successful digital news companies or products, just for example, newsletters, I always see they have a very targeted audience and a very well-defined value proposition for them. So I think we can already see a pivot from mass media to niche audiences on the internet. So to me, one product for all does not sound like a promising strategy. Or to put it in Brian Morrissey's words, as he just said in one of his newsletters, the flimsy era of scale is ended. Now the key is to building tight communities. So my question is, what does that mean for us, for a regional newspaper here in Germany? How can we successfully build digital news products that take that into account? How can we actually start to think about communities and their needs? What has really caught my attention in classes was the job to be done framework. I really like the idea to uncover the jobs a customer hires your media product for. So basically that means we all consume local news for a specific reason, just depending on the situation and the background. So we use local journalism to help us getting a job done. And I introduced this framework to our organization in October with a workshop. It was a one-day workshop with 8 colleagues, and we simply didn't want to have this typical meeting where you just sit together with coffee and cookies, but are not really productive. So first, we described several communities that were related to our work and our newspaper somehow. And then we focused on the 2 most interesting ones. We used the value proposition canvas for that to structure our assumptions we had on the customer jobs we had identified. And then we brainstormed some product ideas. And one of them was a newsletter for immigrants, which is a very interesting target group here, because in this area here of the former German Democratic Republic, many people moved away after the collapse of the country, and they moved to western parts of Germany just to get better jobs. So after the workshop, we did not start the newsletter because first we wanted to learn more about the audience. So we talked to it. We did some interviews to check our assumptions and to learn how they view their homeland, in which situations they think about it, and in which situations they look for which kind of information about the homeland. This was something that really helped us to define a value proposition. And that means now in our newsletter, we show progress, we tell stories of immigrants and returnees, and we show the most beautiful places and areas of the region. After we got that, we did the first issue, but we only used it as a prototype and got back to the audience and asked for their feedback so we can improve again. And then 6 weeks after the workshop, we published the first real edition. And today I can say it was a huge success. The subscriber list is growing pretty fast. We receive a lot of positive feedback from the audience, and the newsletter already brings in some advertising revenue, which is great for us. But more important, it was kind of a pilot project because we learned so much with the process, how we built and designed it. This helped us to build a framework that we want to use for future other audiences to help us to identify their needs and to evaluate them. And that's what we just have started. So now we can better develop new products or improve our quality. And that's what we do. So if you have questions about it, just get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you to Daisuke, Lauren, Jonah, and Alex for sharing these fantastic learnings. We've learned a lot here. So now I'm going to kick it back to Anita for the next conversation.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was fantastic. And one thing that I hope everyone in the audience kind of saw is that we put such a strong focus on product thinking and product strategy on the program. And many participants throughout the program used the frameworks that we applied in classes to actually rethink their own product strategy. And I think all of you from like, revolutionizing the full Japanese, like all of the Japanese media ecosystem pretty much, to rethinking how local journalism can work and become user and audience centric. I'm totally blown away by the work you did, and we can't wait to see how you actually apply those learnings and change the organizations and media ecosystems you're working in. I'm very, very excited about that next little conversation that we're going to be having with two of our participants who I had the pleasure to learn from in this past year. And I'd like to invite the two of them on our little virtual stage here. Rosie Kadanek, who is the Vice President of Product Publishing at the New York Times, and Kim Bui, who is the Director of Audience Innovation at Arizona Republic. Rosie and Kim, thanks for being here today and for sharing a little bit about your work and your capstones and your approach to leadership. So what we decided to talk about today a little bit is management, power, leadership, and diversity, equity, inclusion best practices. So pretty much going deep in the weeds of what we think we need to change in the media industry to make it more equitable, to change the perception of how leaders are seen in the industry, and to diversify and transform the way we manage our organizations. Can you maybe kick us off with a short answer on the very simple question? What is like the one big issue that we need to tackle as an industry? Who wants to start? Kim, kick us off. You have things to say about that.
So many things. Yes, thank you all for showing up. This is kind of like talking to just my classmates, but not. So I think the one big thing that we have to talk about, which is sort of the question that pushed me into my capstone, was what does diversity, equity, inclusion actually look like past the easy answers of hiring and retention and building a pipeline? I think many of us can say the pipeline is very fat at the entry level point and very, very slim at the top point. And there's not a lot of training, not a lot of understanding of how to truly and equitably represent our communities at the top through strategy. So I think what has to change is we have to learn to accept that as journalists, we have power, and as newsrooms, we have power, and that we have to figure out ways to give up and share some of that power with the community. And that's going to require slightly different thinking about what our role is in the community and how we are going to interact with them. Because I don't believe in underserved audiences or marginalized audiences. I truly believe that these audiences have power of their own. We're just not listening. So I often call them underheard audiences. So my capstone focused around what are actual practical ways that we can share power, the power that we hold, which is the power of distribution of information, with the audiences and communities that we serve. In a way where they feel like they are contributors to the conversation as much as consumers of the information.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kim. Rosie.
Hi, and thanks to everyone for this morning. I would +1 everything Kim said. I would also add the big challenge that I see is this huge gap between ambitions, which are high and they should be high, and our ability to execute on those ambitions in a timely manner. And that gap is real, and you want that gap. I mean, that gap is big because you don't want to lower ambitions. But at the same time, there's a limiting factor to how much we can execute. It's 1 year into the pandemic, people are fraying at the edges. So I've lately started calling that gap the Gulf of Despair, because that's really what that gap is full of. That it's a gap that's full of despair and frustration, impatience, anger, and kind of all of these complicated emotions. And so I think that our big challenge is to try to figure out how to make that gulf be one of hope and optimism, and reason to have faith. And that takes a lot of investment, and it fundamentally is a different lens on how we do this kind of work. I think a lot of people will say, like, okay, we're all in on DEI, that's going to add 20% of work to my day-to-day. It's going to add 50% of my work to my day-to-day. And it's not. Like, it's an actually different lens by which you do everything. And so that, I think, is the huge challenge, and it needs to permeate throughout if we want that to be successful.
Awesome. And I said t-shirt quote material. I mean, it's probably a good life practice to just follow everything that Rosie and Kim say whenever. I think you can't really go wrong there with anything. Thanks so much for sharing that. How are you personally? How are you hoping to have that impact? What's kind of your, if you want it, what's kind of your personal like theory of change in that field? Kim.
I think of anything that I have gained from this program, it is the confidence that if we so choose, we can run things. And the big question is, do we want to? And are the things that are open to run the things that we want to run? And that is the question. And the thing I've been looking at and is how do we take, how can I contribute to how we run newsrooms differently from the ground up, and being able to take responsibility as a leader for the things that need to be said to leadership, and also to pick and choose our battles. Like, what is the most important thing that is going to change the industry for where we need to be? We all joke about burning it all down. We can't burn it all down. So how do we change it from the inside? And pay the rent. And that is really important. And I want to be at a place, and I want to build storytelling that is important, but is representative and continues building the pipeline at the top, not just at the bottom.
Amazing. Rosie.
I think that for me, I think a lot about how it has to be safe to make mistakes, because that's how we grow, that's how we learn. And I think about that through everything. Like, how do we, one thing I like to say to my team is, your successes are yours and your mistakes are mine. And it has to be okay to say that, because that's how people grow and learn, and we have to make space for those kinds of things. And I think about, I also think, so I'm in product, I think about how our systems themselves are creating, like, how do our systems themselves create like this space of haves and have-nots? Or did we actually make software that privileges certain people over others? Did we make tools that privileges certain people over others? So that's the kind of change that I am personally trying to push, is that we have to be able to grow, and that comes with mistakes, and that needs to be safe, and that needs to be okay.
One thing I love so much about this group is how different they live and understand leadership from some of the bad leadership and management we often see in news organizations. And I'm very proud that all of you are also just, you know, fantastic and empathetic human beings in being leaders. One question, maybe the last question to ask, is if you would be able to give either your younger leadership self some advice, or you give advice now to kind of an emerging leader in the space of journalism, what's one thing that you'd say to them or to yourself 15 or so years ago?
I think I would tell myself that the fight is long, and it will always be a fight, but it shouldn't always be you at the head of the fight. So find your allies, find the communities that can support you, and the people that can lift you up and keep you going and hand you new weapons, and rely on them. And I think the other thing is to continue and always lean into the things that make you different, and that set you apart. You know, I value empathy very much, and I've written about empathy, and I think that sets me apart from a lot of leadership, because I am very transparent about what I'm personally going through and how that translates to how I'm leading. And I'm also always looking for the hidden seats of power. And I like making connections between people that are have power that they don't necessarily see themselves, whether it's a secretary or a barber down the street, or a union shop leader, whatever it is, to be able to find those connections and to be able to like lift them up as long as I go up. So I think honestly, the advice I would give everybody is it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay in the long run.
Awesome, Kim. Rosie.
So again, I would +1 everything Kim says. I love that she and I are always like, yes, agree. Let's do that together. So everything Kim said, I would also add to that, deeply know yourself. Be centered in your own value system. What do you value? What's your life mission? How do you react to certain things? What are your triggers? I think that's what I would say to the younger version of Rosie. That's what I would say to anyone who's emerging right now. As I've grown in my career and I get more responsibilities, more people, you can't anticipate all the situations that are going to come at you. And when you have these situations, it's good to be grounded in who you are, because that will give you a map to how you're going to respond. So basically everything that Kim said, and also know yourself really well. Take that time.
Fantastic advice. Thank you both for being so generous in sharing it throughout the program and now. And thanks for being part of the conversation. And I'll hand it back over to Melissa to introduce our next group of participants. And we're going to stay in the very similar topic, driving transformation in our organizations. Melissa.
Thanks. What an excellent conversation. And thanks to all of you for sticking around and hearing all these fantastic presentations and conversations. We know it's a long time to be, sitting in one place, and maybe take this opportunity as I'm pulling up the videos here just to kind of take a deep breath. One of the things I've enjoyed about this group is, not only the learnings that we've shared, but also a deep value on taking care of ourselves and one another. And I think that's been a really important factor in all of this as well. So here's your opportunity to take a little stretch and a break as I bring up these next videos surrounding the topic of culture change. So we'll hear from Suzanne Amon, Graham Watson Ringo, and Abby Scott.
Hello, and welcome to Spiegel. My name is Suzanne, and I want to tell you a little bit about Spiegel, its history, and the change process we are working on since 2 years. At Spiegel Group, we have 1,100 employees, and I'm one of them. I started working at Spiegel in 2007 at Spiegel Online. We have a unique ownership structure. With a 50.5% ownership stake, the so-called Mitarbeiter KG is the majority owner of the Spiegel Group. I was elected as a spokeswoman for the Mitarbeiter KG in 2016. That was the point I started to look at the data, at the revenue, at the business model. And to be honest, that was the moment when I realized we have a problem. The Spiegel was a very traditional company, formed and somewhat spoiled by decades of journalistic and economic success. We knew since the early 2000s that our business model was under pressure, but we struggled to make changes, even though the circulation of the print Spiegel and advertising revenue fell since years. But something stuck out of this development: the founding of Spiegel Online in 1994, the website of Der Spiegel. Over the years, it grew into Germany's largest news site, with its own editorial team of over 300 employees. During my time as a spokeswoman, we decided to merge the online and the print editorial teams. And this led to the major change we ever had in the history of Spiegel. Why did we do this? First of all, because our readers don't make any distinction between the website, the digital version, or the printed version of the Spiegel. If the logo of the Spiegel is on the cover, it has to be Spiegel inside. And that's why it has to be one product. Secondly, because we wanted to leverage synergies. While this may sound very corporate, the lack of coordination led to double work. And last but not least, we wanted to modernize, because we wanted to create a corporate culture in which people had a desire for change. This process started at the beginning of 2019 with an editor-in-chief who, for the very first time, is responsible for all channels. We kicked off a change process in which we questioned our workflows and redefined them, in which teams were reassembled, in which department heads were given new responsibilities. When I was in New York last year, I wanted to set up a capstone project which works on our corporate culture. I wanted to learn how to guide my colleagues through this change process. I wanted to learn or to know how to eliminate their fears. And I wanted to create a corporate culture where everybody is open for innovation and change. After the first week in New York, I came back highly motivated and willing to tackle all these questions. And then Corona struck. And Corona changed our corporate culture a lot faster than I would ever have imagined. As a member of the Corona task force, I experienced the rapid conversion of the whole editorial team. Workflows and processes were digitalized, questioned, and simplified. At the same time, we realized that the pandemic would have massive economic consequences. Collapsing advertising revenues on all platforms and the challenges in the print business made it necessary for us to focus even more on growth and revenue areas. At this point, I redefined my capstone project. Meanwhile, we had learned a lot about strategy, about reader retention, about business models. And that's why I redefined my capstone question. How can we increase the number of our digital subscribers? And how can we retain them in the middle and long term? Out of this, a clearly defined goal emerged. We set out to double the number of digital subscribers from the current 100,000 to 200,000 paying subscribers by the end of 2025, while increasing subscriber activity. This is an ambitious plan, but the conditions for change have never been better than now. I'm often asked what I learned at this program, whether it taught me anything at all. And I can say, yes, I learned a lot and it helped me a lot. I learned about strategy, about reader retention, about product, and all this helped me a lot to sort our problems, to set priorities, to prioritize our tasks. I also enjoyed the leadership lessons because at the end of the day, in our company, it very often takes individuals to make a change, to start the conversation. I enjoy that. I like responsibility and the freedom to make choices. I enjoy being trusted by my superiors and management. On the flip side, this means that I was sometimes left to my own devices. I had to learn how to develop a strategy, how to set up a project, how to handle difficult conversations. During my time at CUNY, I found it extremely relieving and helpful to listen to my peers, to learn from them, and to discuss our experiences. And last but not least, I met great colleagues. They are clever, they are interesting, they are smart, and they have a burning passion for journalism. That comforted me and inspired me and helped me a lot. That's why I'm quite optimistic for the future of Der Spiegel and for the future of journalism, even though I'm not sure whether Jeff would sign that.
For us, the coronavirus pandemic was both great and terrible. It was terrible because we're small staff and it's chaotic and we're all having to be all hands on deck. We weren't any different than any other newsroom in the country. And so it was very stressful. It was really difficult to keep the ship together at times. But one thing that we did figure out, once we stopped having this very hair on fire moment and we stopped trying to cover everything of such a large scale thing, and we took a pause and said, what should we be covering that makes sense for us? I think that's when we changed. I think that's when the pivot happened. And that's when reporters started to see their beats, their roles within how we were covering the coronavirus pandemic differently.
We were, as a small newsroom, somewhat unprepared for that. We weren't as dynamic as we needed to be in a lot of areas. Obviously, for 2020, I think that changed in a lot of newsrooms. But those coverage areas, and this has become a cliche, so it exposed the underlying cracks of society. It did that for us too. And so we were like, okay, this was an issue even before the pandemic and even before George Floyd. So it was kind of a wake up call for us, I think. San Antonio report is all staff is engaged on pretty big decisions for the publication, like being involved in selection of the publisher, being involved in the selection of the editor, like that, and being involved in like the visioning process and the logo and all of that stuff is not something you would normally see in like a corporate owned newspaper. So I think I imagine that's somewhat common in kind of startup, nonprofit newsrooms, smaller culture. There's more communication, there's more of like a kind of buy-in of each staff member. So I think what it says about our culture is that we're very familial, like we're in this together type of environment.
So when we broached the conversation about beat changes, it was really important to me to not have that conversation in a vacuum. You know, we were too small of a staff. We had to have that conversation together. And, you know, it was the Jamboard exercise was very important because you saw the buy-in, you saw the fact that lots of people participated. We were actively listening not only to what we were sensing outside of our newsroom, but also to the feelings of those inside of our newsroom. And I think once we finally got together and really talked about it, we knew exactly what we needed to do.
Annually, the business team conducts a reader and member survey, and part of that survey is asking readers what kind of coverage they want to see us expand to. So we saw that those results were affirming of the intention to shift our beat coverage, and that readers and members both were clearly receptive and wanting the beat changes that we were intending to do. Another element of our role in the shift was collaborating with Editorial to ensure that we were communicating accurately and effectively regarding the change. Through the change, you know, we've kind of, I would hope, have made a commitment as a newsroom to always be kind of keeping a pulse on what readers want and asking readers and affirming, you know, what we want to do is what they want to see. The fine balance between editorial direction and what readers will respond to and what they would like to read is a very, it's a fine balance, I mean, but it needs to exist. Now that, you know, we've informed them, and I hope we did a good job of doing so, they will continue to trust us and will only deepen the relationship we have with them as a newsroom that is committed to meeting their needs as a community.
I'm Abby Scott, Deputy Managing Editor of the Financial Times, and I'm a current member of the Executive Programme in News Innovation and Leadership at CUNY. I applied for the programme because I wanted to build on the experience I have in editorial and the newsroom to become a better media leader. I wanted to develop the strategic skills and mindset that would help me affect structural change and support the FT's continued transformation. My role at the FT includes managing a global network of 600 journalists across 3 international newsrooms and multiple foreign bureaus. The FT's history may be as a 133-year-old newspaper, but we have built a successful and thriving digital subscription business with a diversified revenue stream, including events, professional training, and strategic consultants. But if we stand still now, that will mean being left behind. And the media industry and news industry has gone through a huge amount of change and is unrecognisable from the newspaper and print business of only a few years ago. It needs to be preparing for a future without print by equipping its leaders with the ability to manage organisational and operational change, to build profitable business models, and to be people managers that support a new generation of innovative and disruptive thinkers. We need to ensure that our industry is open and inclusive to people from all backgrounds, communities, and ethnicities in order to serve the audiences we represent. The industry's track record in this regard has been poor and requires media leaders to step up and be responsible for change. At the FT, we need leaders who are equipped to manage that fast-paced, ever-evolving environment and understand what is required to lead their teams to even greater success in future. During the programme, I've learned from the brilliant teachers at CUNY, including Anita Zelina and Jeff Jarvis, and also the visiting lecturers like Emma Carew-Groven on diversity, equity and inclusion, Elizabeth Hanson on strategy and change, and Stacey Marie Ishmael on product thinking. For my final project during the executive programme, I've used the learning from our teachers and lecturers across all of the modules to think about how we can better support and develop managers into leadership positions across our transforming industry. At the FT, our senior leadership team is made up of talented and experienced individuals from across the company, people who oversee content, products, services and brands. And as part of my research, I asked some of that group to share insights about their role and their membership of the leadership group. I was seeking to understand how they developed into their role, what expectations there were of them, and how well supported they've been on their leadership journey. That research informed proposals that focused on outcomes that placed FT subscribers at the heart of our business, ensuring audience data is informing our decisions and supporting our innovation. I tried to find ways that we would better collaborate across departments to enable greater innovation and creativity in our product development and our problem solving. I produced an onboarding plan that would support managers into senior leadership roles, focusing on bridging any knowledge gaps and finding methods for breaking down barriers between departments. It would also put emphasis on the structure of succession and retention plans at leadership levels. My learnings on the programme have directly contributed to these plans and improvement suggestions. I know that the programme at CUNY has made me a better leader, and hopefully my research and proposals will support future leaders at the FT too. And in the future, I'm also looking forward to joining the alumni of the CUNY Executive Programme to support and advise the future cohorts of leaders attending each year.
Thank you to Suzanne, Graham, and Abby for those fantastic videos. And now I'll pass it back to Anita for one last conversation.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm so blown away by all your amazing work, and what makes me so happy to see, and I think what's also so interesting is how some topics are recurring, right? While all of you have so many different organizations in 8 different countries of the world, some of the issues that you tackle are so ingrained in the media industry. When we talk representation, when we talk about the transformation of our organizations and transformation of culture, the transformation of our business models, new ways of defining what good leadership looks like. It's so interesting to see whether you run a magazine in Germany or are the head of product in a news organization in the US or build something new in Japan, how these issues come back again and again. So absolutely amazing, amazing to see these kind of red threads that are recurring. And thank you for everyone who stayed with us and was so engaged and shared in the chat as well. We'll have one last conversation as we wrap up this event, and we're going to talk about learnings about leadership and learnings from the program, because obviously this is not just about kind of getting new insights into business models. That's also about transforming. This program is also about transforming as a manager or as a leader. And I'd love to invite 2 people on my virtual stage here, Mary Wilson at Communications A+ Colorado, and Stili Karalambous, who is the CEO of the Daily Maverick in South Africa. So again, an international little panel here. Welcome, Stilly and Mary. And I'd love to kick us off with the question of, when you think back to that January 2020, when you started this journey, what did you learn about yourself as a leader in the past year? Mary, do you maybe want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So when I started, my path is a little bit winding, and something that I really learned is that being a leader is not about you as a manager. It is not one thing. It's not one person, and it's not defined by role. I came into management when I was really young. When I was about 22 years old, I started managing a team at a startup. And since then, I've kind of moved to a few different roles. Some of that has been led and made quicker by the pandemic, and some of that has been personal decisions. But what I've learned is that leadership is not connected to anything external outside of yourself. So I'm been really inspired by my classmates whose careers are really varied and broad and have winding paths. And through transitioning and going to different roles, from a startup to a nonprofit organization, to now working with a research and advocacy think tank focused on education, I learned that my backgrounds can be used in ways and in strengths, but also my background and my resume does not define me as a leader. Seeing my cohort members and these wonderful teammates that I've come to know, I've realized that leadership is really internal, and it's about those decisions that you make in the moment, and what your viewpoint is, and not necessarily what your position is. So yeah, I say all of this to say that within just a year and a half, I realized that leadership and innovation is a lot more internal than it is based on paper, which was a really huge lesson for me.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Mary. Stilly.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. I think I learned about myself, my journey, is how much I didn't know. And that was clear in like the first week. And as you grow from being a founder and a startup and growing into a medium-sized organization as ours, there isn't really a handbook or a training course. This is how to be a CEO. This is how to be a good leader. At least none that I came across or had the opportunity to attend and to participate in. So for me, it was really about recognizing the things that we had done well by natural instinct, but then also realizing that there's just so much out there that we can learn from other industries, and that as an industry, we haven't done the necessary work to invest in our leaders. And we can see that because of the challenges that we've experienced as an industry. The disruption came, and we were way behind the curve in terms of innovation and how other industries view innovation and create cultures of innovation in their organizations. And that really is a failure of leadership. So for us, it's about figuring that out. What is the difference between management and leadership? The role of leaders to create a culture of innovation within the organization. And then it can't just come from the founders, right? It's about creating teams of people and processes and practices where audience-centric innovation can occur. And I think as an industry, we're playing a lot of catch up with that. And the first week made that clear to me.
Thank you for sharing that. What is the one thing that you wish the media industry would realize when it comes to leadership that is important to change? I mean, obviously this could be like we could just for a year talk only about that issue, because there are so many things to tackle. But after kind of reflecting back on the program and on your classmates, what's the one thing that you wish the media industry would really, really tackle when it comes to leadership?
I think it all starts with investing in people and making sure that the training and the development of people is an ongoing thing that starts right down with every person in the organization, no matter what level, all the way up to leaders, and you never stop learning. And I think it's really making that call and understanding that investment in developing of people is so important to happen all the time, and that the only thing that we get going through a process of change and successful innovation is that we get to the beginning again and realize that we have to change and innovate again. And that it's a constant, always on demand. And now that those protectionist barriers of owning channels and oligopolistic ownership of those channels is gone, and the democratization of information and journalism has broken down those walls, we're now in the same space as other organizations where we have to innovate or die. And those demands require that we are continuously improving, continuously thinking about how we can get better, how we can develop ourselves and our colleagues, and that investment is the only thing that's going to help us survive.
I would, my answer is similar to Stylie's in the sense of education. I know so many people that, are young people and that have entered the field. Having a journalism degree, going to school for this, knowing that this wanted to be their path, which is, in one sense, something that is rare and rarer, but in another way, even if students know that this is their path and go into it, the things that they're learning do not match up with what's happening in newsrooms. Learning the inverted period is the inverted paragraph and inverted story is something that, I learned, and I learned a lot of old school techniques, and I learned nothing about social media. I learned nothing about engaged journalism, and working with young people in newsrooms, and being a young person myself, I have had to learn on the job. And there's Slack communities for this. There's different guides. I kind of had a few different capstones throughout my different transitions, and one of them was creating a playbook for engaged journalism, because I feel like the people that often, especially in small organizations that are given these roles of improving audiences and engaging audiences, are learning as they go, because there is no training. And I really wish that the traditional way that people learn to do journalism was more focused and mirrors what is actually happening in newsrooms and what's happening in communities, and is not this top-down story anymore. It needs to be bottom-up and community-focused. So that's something I really hope. There are some great programs like this that are doing that. But for those day-to-day colleges, which are being the talent pool for big organizations, I wish that would happen.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I do agree, education is such a core issue of everything that we're tackling here. I mean, I'd love to ask both of you, because one of the things that we try to make sure in this program is obviously that is about your own organizations, your personal development, but a big kind of focus that we put on it is on sharing the learnings and kind of impacting the broader media landscape and not just your own organizations. So how are you two planning to have that impact? What's, again, if I want to say in those words, what's kind of your personal theory of change in the future?
I'll go. So something that's amazing about this program is, I think before I started this, if you would have asked me that question, I would have had a very organized answer, and that would have been something that I took a lot of pride in. But now I don't. I believe that that I cannot, fake my way and say that I know exactly what I'm doing and what the future will be, because I don't. And that's something that this program taught me, is that, we have to kind of go with where the industry is going. But something that I do know is my personal mission is elevating community voices. And that is vital to healthy media landscape. So some things that I know that I've done in the past that I want to keep doing is elevating young voices. At 6 a.m. City, which was my previous role, we did something called the Voices platform, where people could write themselves at Education NC. I worked with high school students to create a mentorship program where we published their work. And now I work for an education nonprofit where our goal is really to improve public education. So somewhere within that, I know that young people, whether they are 13 to 18, are learning about media literacy, and they need to kind of expand. As I know that the young audience this panel was talking about, the way that young people engage in media is so different, and those tools of what is literacy media, how to know what is how to find information is really great, but then also just elevating those voices and teaching that confidence of your voice matters is something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I want to do. and just making sure that whatever I'm doing, the focus is on the community and not on myself. That's been a big lesson for me.
Yeah, I think in a period of constant change, frameworks and principles and having those guiding principles are really important. And I think it's come up a couple of times as a theme in this course, and today as we're presenting that, audience centricity has to be the thing that guides us, right? And Amazon talks about, the obsession with the customer instead of obsession with competitors, and that has to be the starting point of everything that we do. And if we can teach those principles, that is a starting point, and then work backwards from there. And then how do we use data to know that we're on the right track, and that we're testing and iterating. And so all the jobs to be done framework, product design, all these things that so many other tech companies and other organizations have done so well to employ in their business. There is a version of that works for media and for journalism. And it starts with making the audience, or the people formerly known as the audience, and how we engage with them, putting them at the center, figuring out what their needs are and how their needs overlap with our mission and our vision. And in that sweet spot is where the magic happens. And so if we can teach those principles and create that kind of culture, that any team, whether that's editorial or membership or product, is thinking about things within that framework with that lens, then we'll get better at serving the needs of our audiences and creating value in the eyes of those people. And then that value creates loyalty and habit, and you can do stuff with that, right? You can innovate with that. You can generate revenue. You can figure out which new revenue streams are applicable and relevant, and which new products to launch. And so I think for me, it's really just about, in this deluge of stress and data and noise, what are the things that we can build some really great foundations on, and those are the principles, starting with the audience and working backwards from there.
Thank you both for sharing that. That was fantastic. What beautiful, nearly last words in that conversation. And I'd like us to go back into the large room and large group from that panel. And I'd like us to just start slowly wrapping that day up. I am so thrilled that all of you were part of our very first cohort that we gathered here at the school. We are so impressed by your work, and we can't wait to see the impact that all of you will be having on the media industry, on your organizations. I want to thank everyone. We had such a great attendance and audience today. Thanks everyone for being there, for asking questions, for being part of that conversation. We will share the video and links about the class and their work afterwards to everyone who registered. It was a fantastic journey, and it's only the first station that we have now. And this cohort and this group is going to be connected forever, and we are super grateful for being part of it. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, everyone. Yes, saying your goodbyes in the chat. Please be in touch if anyone has questions about the group, about the people in the group. Again, we'll send out contact information and more materials, but do feel free to reach out to us or to any of them if you have any questions about the program, any questions about the projects. And thank you all for your amazing work. And tomorrow we actually have the final, like the official graduation. So very much looking forward to that.
Anita.
Yes.
Before we go, we were talking in our own little Slack about how we didn't want to miss this opportunity with everyone to thank you and Jeff and Melissa and everyone else at CUNY for the incredible work and passion that you guys have put into this program over the last year. You really made it feel just incredibly welcoming, and we've all had a blast. So thank you so much.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's such a such a pleasure to work with all of you and with everyone involved in that program, and all our fantastic instructors and coaches. And we couldn't be prouder. We'll save the, as Jeff would say, we'll save the ugly crying for our kind of graduation ceremony tomorrow. But thank you for those words, Jonah, and thanks everyone for the kind words and for being here. See you all soon and see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.